Welcome, friends, to another piping hot, yet somehow in March, piping hot episode of the Mettle podcast. I am still, as of last time I checked, Omar Sangurima, joined as always by the inimitable Alyson Laderman. Alyson.
Hey, Omar. It's good to see you again. We have a special guest with us today. So, as a reminder, Omar, you want to give your background of who you are? Just so they know. I know they know, but maybe we got new people listening.
I do cyber very okay. Like that's kind of where that's it.
You know what? Check him out on LinkedIn. He's a bit more than okay. That is for sure.
And
I am and I am Alyson Laderman. I am the CEO of Mettle, which is a nonprofit dedicated to creating entry-level workforce positions here in cybersecurity and making our communities more cyber resilient and cyber secure. And as always, we'll give you the little disclaimer, though I am joined today by two gentlemen that are cyber experts and two people, that myself included, that are lawyers. We are neither here to serve as your cybersecurity expert or your lawyer for the purpose of the podcast, but we are here to share our experiences, our wisdom and knowledge, and hopefully give you something to think about and conversations to be continued after this podcast, and maybe even some stuff you can implement within your business. So with that being said, we are very fortunate to have with us today Graeme Rudd. Graeme, oh my goodness, is a former Green Beret. He is also, I'll say, a recovering lawyer like myself, and also one of the heads at Assessed Intelligence, where they offer cybersecurity services for businesses, and they are the creators of the Arise framework. And what we're going to talk about today is a bit about the framework and how it came to be, and why that matters for you in your business. They've worked really hard to combine basically the cybersecurity framework from NIST CSF and some AI governance pieces to really show that collaboration, that cross-pollination and crosswalking, all the crossing.
Right.
But how AI security really is part of cybersecurity and how you can apply that for your business. So with that, Graeme, welcome to the pod today.
Thank you so much for having me on. I know we've spoken a lot and really interested in diving into these topics today. You know, recent news has really been fast and hard. And so I think a lot of the things that we've been discussing over the past couple of months are starting to unfortunately come true. And hopefully more people will start taking these risks seriously so they can start heading some of the stuff off, at least the preventable stuff.
You know what, for context, what are some of the news things that you've seen just recently that are really kind of at the top of your mind that are like, yeah, we've been talking about this. Now everybody needs to know about this.
One thing that's really actually started catching my attention is the disparate rates of burn for tokens. And I am not technical. A lot of the stuff that I'm reading flies way over my head, but the end result is real. And the reason that I highlight that is governance and security in a lot of ways is more than just about avoiding regulatory scrutiny or staying out of trouble. It's about actually maintaining your organization, the continuity. And I recently read a peer-reviewed study called Agents of Chaos, and part of that experiment, they ended up with two agents talking to each other in a loop, and they built 60,000 tokens before they shut it down. And now that was an experiment, right? But I think that extrapolates out to a broader experience where you could wake up and find out that you burned through far more tokens for no reason than you expected. These are the type of things that I'm following now, because if fear was a motivating factor, all these organizations would be locked down like they're the NSA, right? It's clearly not. So what does actually matter is contextualizing the threat in a way that actually matters to the people that are making decisions. And a lot of the time that comes down to money. Tokens are a representation of both energy and money. And so, if that is the original motivating factor to start a governance conversation, so be it. I'm happy to be there, but I think that is something that I'm really starting to focus on, because at the end of the day, I think we've learned this a lot from the cybersecurity perspective too, is you're not effective if you can't communicate the risk to somebody. If they don't take it seriously and they don't think that they actually have a problem, they're never going to explore any of the other issues that are going on. And so that's one of the things that I'm really trying to do, is focus on meeting organizations where they're at, in the reality of where they're at, and acknowledging the competing factors and the risks that they're going to have to take on. So yeah, that was kind of a long, winding answer.
No, I think that's dead on. And, for some in the audience, obviously the tech folks are going to understand tokens, but if you can just kind of break that down even further for maybe a new organization that doesn't quite understand how that term applies and why they should care about it.
So again, in my extremely non-technical understanding, to me,
But
it's
that's why I'm asking you.
Right.
You'll make it non-technical because you're going to convert it to your language that I think will relate. So,
okay, yeah, no. For me, it's fuel, right? It's just like gas in your tank, right? And how fast are you burning it? If you've started tweaking your engine wrong because you don't know what you're doing, like me, you might have a really inefficient route. Now, that is a governance problem. But here's the other thing, too, that attends with that. If you are misconfigured because you don't know what you're doing in that respect, what else is going on in your organization that is also misconfigured that could be problematic? And I think that's what we really need organizations to understand, is because the threat from this new type of software, this technology, whatever you want to call it or classify it, is fundamentally different than software. The example I always use when I talk to potential clients is this: a small but significant portion of a population commits suicide after interacting with these devices for a period of time. That is known as an issue, right? And some of these devices or these platforms, these bots, agents, whatever they are available to people at their place of work. I think that in the not too distant future, we're going to see an unfortunate incident unfold because of something that someone was interacting with at work. And when that bereaved spouse or family member comes asking questions, the cyber team is not going to be able to help you with that, right? There's no like firewall updates you can put in. This is a legal, ethical, leadership, and human resources issue, because fundamentally this is different. And that's an example why, like when you bought a CRM 10 years ago, you didn't worry that somebody could produce inappropriate images with your CRM. You didn't worry that they would create a semi-autonomous element that could communicate with customers unsupervised. These just weren't things that we worried about. That's all in people's environments now, and they're operating under the liability assumptions that made sense in the SaaS era that don't exist anymore.
I think that's an excellent point that companies don't think about, right? Which is AI is built into almost all of the technology at this point, and the different things that we have and access without even thinking about what they need to consider. And the idea to me that it can access all of my contacts and send autonomous emails. I know people are like, yeah, it's efficient. I'm like, that's scary as heck. You don't necessarily know what's going out and when it's going out and what the context is and the follow-up. And there's a lot of those pieces. And I know you go, no, I wrote the template. But how do you know if it's still acting in the way that you originally said it? Because people set it and forget it. And the forget it is definitely a problem that we have seen, because things deviate over time because of the changes in the data set and in the training and the different things that happen through the use of AI. I think Avi in a prior episode, right? Like the degradation of the system.
The drift.
The drift.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep, absolutely.
See, my brain wasn't there, but yes, the drift that happens over time.
I'm a little hurt, Alyson. You brought up my arch nemesis, Ron Popeil, with the set it and forget it comment there. It's a deep-seated thing. Back in the day when I used to play Halo on campuses, we used to like rig it so you'd have 64 people and what a map meant for 16. And then, but like I would always get smoked by this one dude named Ron Popeil. For some reason, he always had it out for me. He was always hunting for El Mariachi, I guess. I don't know. Maybe he had a bad encounter with some Mexican food or something. I don't know. But like he was always coming after. And then I met him once and I was like, man, him? I was like, oh no. Like I was even sadder. But to Graham's point, that's the governance was lacking. And as you said, the fear isn't a motivator. Even before you put a jetpack called AI on all of these processes, right? All of the plumbing, all of the things that Alyson's mentioning that it has access to, those were already problematic, but at least they were like slowly problematic. Like it was, like the data governance wasn't there. Some of the cyber stuff wasn't locked down. As you brought up, the ethical, the legal, HR maybe was a step behind. Thankfully here, where at the 9 to 5, like that's one of the things that, our HR legal person is an absolute stalwart. She's phenomenal. Also, not a recovering lawyer, but like a lawyer and just somebody that makes me think, yeah, lawyers are homies. So, shout out to Leslie there. But like, I bet you're finding we're unprepared for that rate of acceleration, for like how fast that stuff's going, right?
I think to your point about the rate of acceleration, it's one of the reasons that I also like transitioned over to doing what I'm doing right now. Is there is one area, and that's the military, that deals with frontier technology and bleeding edge stuff as just a matter of course with high consequences, right?
Sure.
And so I think that's why you're seeing in a lot of ways a lot of veterans transitioning into the cybersecurity space, not just because of the technical work that they're doing in the service, but also because they understand how a large organization needs to coordinate so they can move in lockstep. Because now, if you're jumping into AI, you are taking on risks that before only very specific organizations really had to worry about. But like, I think one tangible example is, right, insider threat. That's something that people like to talk about a lot, right? And it is a real issue, and we know that. And I would ask you, what is an agent at the end of the day inside of your system? It's an insider threat as well. And if we don't start viewing these things in those terms, we're going to have problems. And I think, it's going to take a lot of coordination in organizations to leverage and harness the capability of this, because you can't truly leverage the capability if you're not doing it in a secure and responsible manner. I think this is something that Alyson and I talked about before, is like 3 to 5 years from now, if you have a successful AI business, I'm sure it's going to have all of the requisites, right? It needs to be able to scale. It's differentiated. It has a moat. It solves a real problem. All those things that we know. But it's also going to need licensure and certification. Nobody's going to buy a medical AI solution that can't provide you with HIPAA protections, right? And so while we're moving fast, breaking things, you get proof of concept and an idea over the weekend now. That's a mirage, right? Just because it can do it doesn't mean that you can as an organization. In a lot of ways, I equate this to be like giving someone a really sophisticated muscle car that's stick shift, and they've never driven a stick shift. Like, they can take it off the lot. You may not like what comes back, right?
Sure, right. Or that might be the last thing they do.
Exactly.
Right. In certain cases, I love your bringing together the military, folks coming out of the military, veterans. My CISO at where I'm, my 9 to 5 is ex Air Force, and it's just, again, the leadership is just like top notch, right? I smooch his booty when he's here, so I'll say it when he's not here, right? Like I love working for the guy. I truly do. So the leadership is top notch, but there's also like you said, playing with live rounds, understanding that there's absolute real life consequences on a scale that nearly any other niche, like even healthcare, really, truly, like on just the scale of what can go bad in a short amount of time, it's bar none. Right. So, which is why, I love when that's such a great background, right. For cyber. Is there, speaking of the news, right. Like it's not like the phrase that keeps coming up, Graeme, is like, vets may love the game, but the game may not love them. Like, is it like, are you seeing that enough is being done to like honor that sort of capability
Question. I think in short, it's very difficult for both industry and veterans to understand each other and figure out where they need to connect. I'll give you a really recent example is some of the guys that I used to work with go through specialized training that is much more related to like the cyber domain. And that is extremely specialized training, and it is heavily focused on red teaming. One of the guys I know that was doing that is about to get out. He never had heard that there were, basically red cell firms out there that were doing red teaming and actual physical penetration testing and stuff like that, because that's what he's doing in the military. And I was like, I am pretty sure any one of those people would really like to see your resume. But he's about to exit his time in service, and he had no idea that that was even a thing that existed in the commercial space. And I think that's the problem really fundamentally. I mean, there's a lot of other ones, but like,
Sure.
if you don't even know that exists and you're never even going to apply to that job because you've never, that's where we're seeing a lot of the issues.
Do programs like SkillBridge help with that? Where they
Yeah.
can help place them in jobs and make that transition and say, hey, by the way, here's a good fit. And if it does, I mean, why are more, I mean, so I only know a little bit about SkillBridge, having not gone through it myself, right? So I'm saying this as an outsider. Is it something that is made readily accessible and knowable to those in the military? Like, hey, here is this opportunity, or is it just kind of like, if you know, you know?
You know, I'm not really sure. I have met a number of people that have done the SkillBridge, but I haven't myself. I think it was just coming out when I was leaving. I was not aware of it when I exited. I really wish I had. I will say in my anecdotal experience, the ones that have gone through SkillBridge, Honor Foundation, or something like that seem to be much more prepared for the realities of the market and have done their networking in a way that you just can't do when you're still on active duty, and that's your like sole focus. You know, but I think that's also a lot of real coordination and heavy lift administratively, right? Because there's a lot of factors, like they're getting out of the military, they've got all those duties to do, and then also working. So I know there's a lot that goes into it. It's our hope that once we get to a point where we can sustain it, we'd love to do SkillBridge or something like that, because it's beneficial for the organization and for the individuals. It's beneficial for industry too, because a lot of these people are leaving with the military with like some very cutting edge
amazing experience and knowledge, like stuff that you would pay so like wild top dollar to grab if somebody, and or that you might not even believe if it wasn't in that, like, oh, you're telling me you work with XYZ, okay bro, but like if then it's in a military setting, well of course they did, you know.
So you know who I'm thinking of, right? My prior CTO,
100%.
bonkers brilliant, and was doing AI for Space Command 10 years ago. And people are like, what? And I'm like, nah, it legit says it on his transcript. I mean, he's been doing it for a very long time and understands this better than anybody else and can code and do things I've not seen other people do.
It's pretty unfair. Yeah.
You know, trying to transition though, right? We've heard it can be quite a challenge for those trying to go into civilian life. And that's one of the things we want to help with Mettle, right? It's like, hey, I know it's entry level jobs, but let's get you in with company, you know, we'll be the company, get you the skills, get you introduced, get you in the marketplace, and that type of stuff. But to your point, Graeme, as well as Jose Toledo, who was on a prior episode with us talking about this.
Boy, love that
right?
guy. Yeah, man.
People from
another
the
Air
military.
Force guy, like just like a wild pen tester, right? And he says something similar there, Graeme, where it's like, listen, thank goodness I had like homies that would tell me what was up to then like at least start getting into those streams. And then he was able to transition, but he goes, I know folks that are better than me. And I'm like, Jose, cut it out, because that's a little scary. But he's like, I know folks that were better, you know, sicker with it than I was, who just didn't know. And then like they're having trouble, you know, even like grabbing like a IT like help position versus, and it's like, wait a second, like you said, it's almost like having a Ferrari that you use just to get groceries. Like, wait, like, what's going on? Like, this is such a great, but it's great to hear that like that's on the roadmap for y'all. Because it's I mean, I have yet to work with somebody with that background that's not just pretty amazing.
I'm looking forward to it.
I'll say, Graeme, tell us a little bit about Assessed Intelligence and how you all got started and how you came up with the Arise framework.
Sure. You know, one of the things that I saw when I was working at the DOD, I guess now it's DOW lab. I'm so used to saying DOD, it's really hard to
Sure.
You can stick with DOD. It's all right.
We won't tell.
We all understand.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, there was one thing that I really took away from I saw over 350 different unique technologies come through. The ones that built things from the ground up properly and securely did so much better than their competitors. So the thing is, just like with the move fast and break things era that is still kind of going, that was not a popular point of view, right? There was a lot of, let's just get to the MVP and get this thing sold. And you hear that a lot. now, and I get it, right? There are a lot of competing interests, but in the military environment, right, once you get to procurement, they are going to have standards and they are not going to budge on them. Like that is a hard and fast rule that everyone knows about. And that's a huge part of what we're doing in the lab is educating these organizations like, look, it is saving you time and money, and it is getting soldiers, service members, this technology that they need more efficiently. So, let's do this the right way. And the companies that listened really did well. They had to have all the other stuff that a company has and an idea and everything like that, but they made it through procurement, and they didn't have some of the issues that other organizations had going forward. And so that's something that's really stuck with me. And when I saw all the snake oil and grifting going on as AI started hitting the public conscious, I really started searching around for what do I want to do next, because I suddenly have a bunch of relevant experience in this space. I've been working with machine learning and AI since 2011.
Wow.
At the time, nobody cared about. When I left the lab in 2019, I didn't think anyone would ever care at all that I was working with any of that stuff.
Wow.
It was very impressive, right?
True.
But at the same time, underlying limitations that we see now were there. Like the facial recognition stuff we worked with. If you want a clean-shaven white male, it didn't. And I would argue that many of those underlying problems with bias and stuff like that have not been resolved adequately, right? The self-driving cars were extremely impressive, but I would not trust my life in one of those. And I'm still very wary of the idea of getting into a Waymo, as impressive as they may be. The one area.
Yeah. No, and now they're coming out like
cases with cars that move on their own. Hard no for me. We're good.
And now the next iterations, right, that I'm seeing are you don't even have a steering wheel, like, which I just read that and I just was deeply terrified. I was like, nah, bro. Yeah. Like, there's no way.
I was in San Francisco for the first time recently, where those Waymos are everywhere.
Sure.
There was something extremely disconcerting about I was trying to walk to the car that I was parked at, and a Waymo was going by me with nobody in the driver's, and you're just like, there is a car approaching me.
Yep.
There's no one I can see that's driving it. I know this is a computer, but so I saw those things for a long time, and I knew there's a lot of limitations to things, but there's a lot of power too, because the one subset of AI and ML was really ML that we saw that was very impressive was imagery analysis, pattern matching, stuff like that. That is where I was like, this stuff is really, really got legs. And we have been doing that for a lot longer though too, right? Radiologists and Air Force targeteers share a lot of common interest in that technology field.
Yep.
And so that one's pretty advanced compared to the other ones that I saw when I was there. But what I really saw was like some of the limitations and the strengths, and then you just start seeing all the snake oil out there. And I saw a lot of it at the lab, right? It was the marketing people always come too. They're, this can do everything, and then you'll never break that. And 30 seconds later, the soldiers are snapped in half. That really happened.
I've heard the stories.
I can see it.
But I've also, like, there's business cases. Like there's in business school, there's a lot of, like study cases about, like overhauling military procurement and what worked and what didn't. And underlying was like a lot of that snake oil nonsense, because there's, the buckets of money at the end of the rainbow for people coming in, and listen, people will do a lot for $20. Imagine when you add a bunch of zeros at the end of it, and you're like, wait a second, but it's unsafe.
And so, as I started seeing all this stuff coming out there, I found Josh, who was our original founder, and my other co-founder, Katie. She's been working in the AI space for a long time as well, and Josh has too. We really, I think, share a lot of common ground on the idea that you do need to build this technology in a secure and responsible manner, both for the good of your business, but also because it's an ethical, moral, and legal imperative, right? And I think that there is a compelling case to be made that you can move at the speed of business, and you can do it right, and you can do it safely, and you can do it responsibly. So that's what we really coalesced on, and that's, I think, at a core what assessed intelligence is there to do. And we accomplished that primarily through audit or pre-audit, which is pretty self-explanatory. And then we do it through advisory as well. One of the things, I don't think it is unique to us. I do think we're some of the few ones that are taking this approach currently. So we don't see a differentiation between cybersecurity and AI GRC. I just, like, you cannot extract them from each other at this point. think in 5 years, I don't even know what they'll call it, but I just don't see them being like distinct unto themselves because how? And so that was like the basic premise too. Is like you can't have everything in a silo, right? And that's one of the ways that we've traditionally tackled cybersecurity, which has not been great. I don't think most people will say it's been particularly great, and it's getting worse now, right? And so not only is it getting worse, but it is getting much more confusing, and that's really where Arise came from. We had been working on a maturity assessment for a while. After starting to interact with some initial potential clients, we started realizing it was so overwhelming for them to even figure out what they needed to know that it was just impossible. So like they didn't even know where to begin. They didn't even know what to ask. A lot of times they didn't even know what information they should be telling you because they were so confused by all of it. So what we realized is like we have to approach basically this intake and this scoping in a organized fashion that's going to bring them through this process in a way that we can actually elicit the information that's going to give them actionable results. And then the other part of this was it's these disparate frameworks, right? We see this in the privacy landscape. It's an absolute nightmare. Nobody likes it. We're going to see the same thing already developing the AI space. Now, I know there's talk out there about executive orders and legislation. I don't know if that's going to happen, but right now I can confidently say there are a lot of different requirements, both for AI itself, but then pre-existing requirements, right? Like HIPAA doesn't disappear because you're using a chatbot. It probably actually gets worse, but that's it. And so what we really want to do as well is help organizations navigate all these disparate frameworks under a unified umbrella that does two things. One, it identifies where there's redundancy. If you're going to do HIPAA, EUAI Act, right, SOC 2, CMMC, you name it, you're probably going to repeat the same thing a number of times. So why would you want to do that? But also, what Arise does is looking at both cybersecurity and AI best practices in a holistic manner. It identifies gaps. There are many things that we already know you have to do that are not reflected in a regulatory framework right now, right?
Yep.
And it's just going to continue because, I mean, man, we can wake up next week and there's going to be a whole new thing that AI is doing that we now have to account for, and I can't even conceptualize it right now.
Yeah.
So that's really the premise of Arise, is giving organizations a common operating picture to move forward and to do it in a way that makes sense for their industry, the size of their organization, the maturity of their organization, and where they're at. Because really, going back to the very basic premise of doing this right from the start, a lot of the things that can really help with, in my opinion, with cybersecurity and governance both are low lift, no cost or low cost organizational conversations from the beginning. So I just did a 2-hour workshop for an AI accelerator. And that's what it was. It's 5 W's: who, what, where, when, and why.
Yeah.
We just talk about what are we even doing with AI, or just do you know what tools are being used? And if you don't, you should start talking. And so that's what we're really trying to do with Rise as well, is give people a free resource, not to tackle the whole thing by themselves, but to give them a common starting point. Because this is the one thing I was telling to all the startups was, it's important for you now, don't get me wrong, we all need to do this stuff. But as you grow as an organization, as you lose that ability to actually tell people what to do individually, it's your governance, it's your policies, it's your standard operating procedures that are going to tell people how to do this going forward. And if you haven't articulated that, you're gonna do that in a reactive manner, which means it's going to be reacting to incidents and problems. That is a inefficient way to run a business, I would argue.
And not only that, but like I would say, you've mentioned this a couple of times, and I'm loving to hear it, but it's unethical. Just
Right.
brass tacks.
Absolutely.
Like we're at the point where, we're discovering fire, right? And we're just like not doing it safe. Like we're just like, yeah, let's, cool, let's burn down a forest just because, we can, or just because we just wanted to use it for what we needed to use it for, and not do it responsibly. There's a serious, with the type of real world consequences that these things can have, where we're putting them in workflows that can touch people, that can hurt people, that can put people in harm's way, or institutionalize the bias that hasn't been, excised out of it, as you stated. These are not new problems. They've just been swept under the rug for the sake of progress. At what point do we say, wait a second, we can't do this? Like if we let it go too far out, it'll be uncontrollable. That's I think like my fear. And
Yeah.
sorry for the doom and gloom, but
I'm worried about my kids growing up under the yoke of Skynet's idiot cousin, because that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with like the idiocracy.
That's a
version
beautiful
of
way to
Skynet.
say it, because it's not even. Even if we miss, or even if we're able to put enough guardrails where, okay, like you can't auto shoot stuff, or we pay attention to the fact that when you do war games with these things, they always go to nuke immediately, right? I've read those stories where I'm like, holy, but like it'll be the idiot cousin.
Yeah,
like that, yeah.
That's what I'm worried about, because I'll give you a real world, I think, analog that we can conceptualize a lot better. Is look at robotics right now. There are some real advances in robotics, but one thing that you'll notice that's unique about a lot of the robots that are getting a lot of press is humanoid.
Yep.
Right. Now think about that though from an efficiency standpoint. Granted, we have opposable thumbs. We can do a lot, but our range of motion is not ideal, right? Like if I could turn my head 180 degrees and look behind me, that would be an advantage from a biological perspective, potentially, right? Robots can do that. Like, why should their joints only go forward when they can go back?
Mm-hmm.
What I'm illustrating here is that we're building in our image because that's what we understand, and that's how we can model movement. And eventually, though, it's going to switch to, it doesn't need to be bipedal. It's going to be a lot more efficient in some other configuration.
Sure.
You know what? It doesn't make sense to have two cameras like this. It makes sense to have like the Omni cameras, like a
like a spider.
Like a spider, exactly.
Yeah.
I don't know, but like eventually they're going to figure out those modalities, and the way that it's built, it's going to be a lot more efficient, especially for the purpose that it's built. And that's when we're going to really start losing control of how to operate and understand these things, because now it is moving in a control plane that doesn't make sense to us anymore. And that's how I view AI generally as well. And so the less that I understand about what I'm seeing in this physical space, the more I'm concerned now. And another example of that is, look at image generation. I mean, from Will Smith, that like
the
mashup
spaghetti
to where we are now has been pretty scary.
and fast.
Very, very fast. And that's the mirage too. It's a speed. Is that we're seizing the really cool things without realizing that we've picked up something with deep and dangerous roots, you know? So yeah, I definitely share those concerns.
I'm glad I'm not the only one, because it's, you know, it's and same sort of situation, right? My child is 2, and I'm going, you know, there's the job concerns for sure. Like, what the heck is she gonna do? I don't know what work is gonna look like. But then in a real setting, this can get away from us. It's starting to. There's certain use cases where it's like, wait a second, you know, I mean, you brought up the radiologist, you know, learned doctors, super great skilled folks, for the first time, like that type of knowledge work, you know, was considered impervious, or, you know, especially in this country, right? It's held in a different light there, right? Y'all's, you know, erstwhile professions, right, as well, and with the in the legal space, you're starting to see zany antics and shenanigans where again, getting a you know, I if only it could be, you know, just Benny Hill, right? We play the theme and it's all just those kids no, it's having real world effects that could be potentially, again, lead to harm, right? In my realm, patient harm is the ultimate thing, and we're just all terrified of like what's going to be the first thing that's just like, it's just so easy to use and it's just so convenient, but then, oh, wait a second, someone died. That's
but you know, it's going to take more than someone dying for them to care. They don't stop it. That's the problem. It's not the one person died. It's going to take lots to where somebody complains or sues, and there's a class action saying,
and there needs to be
there's
the liability.
A problem.
Yes, there needs to be the liability piece, because it has to be where it's like
they
that
won't
one
care
case
otherwise.
Exactly, where then it's suddenly, you know, it's weird that we're starting to see it, like, oddly enough, in the cyber insurance realm. Right, where there's I
follow that closely.
Where it's just like, listen, you guys are essentially negligent, and we're just not going to pay. And then you see a lot of businesses clutching their pearls, like, wait a second, I bought insurance. No, you you bought it, but like you're doing
that's a whole conversation. What people
1000%,
think
yeah.
insurance is that it's their lotto
Oh,
ticket to
yeah.
cover all things. And it's like, have you ever read your policy? Just read it. You'll be
That's it.
shocked what is not covered. Like I've explained before, in Florida, wind-driven rain is not covered. What's a hurricane? Okay. So even when there's hurricane damage, you're like, no, we'll cover the hurricane damage, but not the wind-driven rain that came through the side of your house at the envelope. And you're like, that's a distinguishing thing. But you know what? I've had to fight that fight. So it's a very real thing. And when we're looking at cyber and AI policies, I was just looking at this earlier today, actually. It was on somebody else's page about what's being covered and what's not being covered and the little nuance of that language of when you're negligent and other things like that. I know what it was. It was a third party. It had to do with phishing, and it was a third party they weren't expecting to do business with. And so it was something that came in, somebody clicked on something they shouldn't have, and the carrier won because the court said, well, the policy only anticipates that if it were something that came through somebody you were expecting to get something from, you had no business opening something that just kind of came in willy-nilly that was not somebody you already do business with. So they're like, yeah, the intention of the policy is, the other side got hacked. They didn't know, but it's a common thing on your end and you did your due diligence essentially. But by just opening up random stuff that came in, you're not covered. So it was an interesting little nuance in a line that they put in there of, no, if it was not anything you were expecting, you don't get coverage for that.
Yeah, I've been following the cyber insurance in particular really closely, and from what I've seen so far, it seems like we're still in a mode where they're watching and waiting, right? They're willing to take on some unquantified risk now so they can get the requisite data, because like at the end of the day, they're only going to do it if it makes sense, right?
Of course, yeah,
exactly.
And so there's definitely money to be made there, but I do think that this is going back to my licensure and certification as like one of the prerequisites for success over a long term. I think this comes back to the insurance conversation too, right? Eventually, they're going to start demanding standards. 83% of enterprise clients require SOC 2, right? That's not saying SOC 2 is going to make you safe, but like if you want to sell to an enterprise client, you should probably start prepping for SOC 2, right? Because like there's a really good chance. I don't see a world going into 2028 where we don't see something like that being required in the AI space, because how many times are they going to get bitten, both from an insurance perspective, but also from a client perspective? How many vendor issues are you going to have? And not just vendor issues. This is something that I really came to appreciate working as a commercial contracts attorney at Viva, is if you're dealing with 500 customers, they cannot each have their own individual AI policy, and that is unmanageable for a large organization, even with significant resources. Not only is it unmanageable, but it also presents a security nightmare if everybody is configured in different ways. So I just don't see a world where standards don't start emerging. I think regulation is going to be the number one thing that drives it. So that's not in place right now. Where do we look to next as the driving factors for me is procurement and then policies, right? Like insurance. And then lending. Oh, that's another thing I think we're going to start really seeing is like two things that you see right in the AI space a lot of is vaporware, which is really just like some wrap around of a frontier model. I don't think banks want to put money into that for much longer. And then the copyright risk. Like if your solution requires material that you should not have and someone figures that out, that's a really bad place to be. And for organizations that built things on a vibe coded platform and may not have ever actually done an inventory of what their agent was going out and grabbing from God knows where, that's a real outstanding question. And I think that many of the organizations that are investing money or interacting with these organizations haven't fully processed the risk that they're taking on from that, but they're going to find out, unfortunately, through really nasty incidents.
That's a lot.
I'm just
the air there.
You got to sit with that, you know.
I'm playing that out, and I'm again, right from the patient harm perspective and the even just the understanding, the thing I was wrestling with the other day was, okay, if we're going for, which would you prefer? This was like I don't know how this became like a raging thing on Teams channel for my team, but would you prefer to be be told, have a false positive of a diagnosis for cancer, and then go through everything and then find out, oh wait, it's not there? Or would you rather err on the side of a false negative? And of course, I think like enough people, but we went back. It was almost like that Office episode where they're like, "Is Hillary Swank hot?" And it just turned into like this giant, I was like, wow, people are really. I kind of liked it, but then after a while, I was like, my team's is just blowing up. We need to work. But it's very. I don't think anyone's really like you said, Graeme, like regulatory wise or even industry wise, because I could feel, because let's not forget, right? PCI DSS is a thing, right? It wasn't like regulation. Like I think card carriers, right? Card companies just said, we're sick of this nonsense. Everyone's just out here doing like crimes essentially, or being negligent and being criminally negligent in a way. If you want to use our stuff, here's some standards. Surprisingly effective. Not from a regulatory standpoint, but then but I don't even see that emerging yet because no one can get their arms around it.
Yeah, I think that's a huge issue you're pointing to, and it raises another thing that I think we're going to start seeing an unfortunate amount of discussion around, and that's acceptable error rates, right? Look, we are approaching not only the largest doctor shortage that I'm aware of in U.S. history, but we're also approaching it at a time where one of our elderly generations, the boomer generation, is entering its like most. So we're gonna have some real problems there, right? And so like even if you just take AI away from the second, right? What happens when you have too much demand and not enough to fill it? Standards are going to decline necessarily because there's not enough resources, right?
Exactly.
So now are you talking about changing your idea of acceptable risk? Well, if AI starts getting better at predicting whether you have breast cancer or not, I would submit to you that there's a time in the not too distant future where you will expect that as part of your standard of care. Because even if it has an error rate, as you mentioned, if it's less than a human, companies are going to have a real argument as to why they should be able to continue, knowing that it might kill you accidentally. Yeah. But then again, we do that to each other.
Right.
And I'm not endorsing a single way of thinking here. I'm just saying this is, I think, going to be a practical reality that we're going to have to contend with. And so how do you manage risk like that with humans? You put processes and policies in place and safeguards and like exactly what we're talking about with doing with AI. And I think that's going to be part of the necessary way to go forward. And I think what I see right now is, and this is no surprise, this is in any space, right? You've got the doomers and the accelerationists on either side, and they are taking up 99% of the oxygen in the room, right? On one side, you have people just unobtainium is going to be here tomorrow, and then other people are like burn Silicon Valley to the ground, right? And it's like neither of those realities going to happen. So what are we practically going to have to deal with, right? Like I just came back from going to an event where they're using AI to do some really amazing stuff at unlocking how we look at the brain. That's the type of stuff that I want to see, right? Like that could really have huge impact for so many people. Like when you think of like, why are we here with AI and technology? That's what I want to see.
Yes.
And then the question then becomes to me is how do you enable those people to do it right? Because I think the other thing here is, and, not to be mercenary, but since we have to go back to this as the bottom line, I think what you will see, just like with PCI DSS, is the ones that are doing it successfully and are doing it in a safe and responsible manner, they're going to start proving that this is actually a necessity for a quality product. And because what's going to happen, in my hope and opinion, is those organizations that are doing it really well already, and they're out there, right? We can see some of them. Yeah. They're not really broadcasting it much. That's a competitive advantage for them, right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
But I think most of them, if you looked under the hood, are treating it like any other software that they adopted. They're doing due diligence. They're making sure that they have security checks in place. They're making sure that they're training their workforce on what this is. They make sure they're having conversations about their leadership of like, what can this do? What can't this do? And then more importantly, and this is the last question we asked in the workshop that I was doing, is why? Why AI, but not just why AI? Why does this have to be a generative process or workflow?
Mm-hmm.
If there's a yes or no answer, like why is an agent involved in this? And maybe you have a compelling reason. Again, that's far more technical than me, but these are the questions that you have to have, because that's going to determine whether the stuff is actually giving you AI slop or measurable output. And I'm working already with one startup in the healthcare space that is taking this extremely seriously, because this is a determination they made before they even came together to start putting IP into like paper, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like they know, and I don't think they're going to be the only ones that are taking that approach and angle, because in the heavily regulated spaces, this is non-negotiable.
Yeah.
I don't know any banks that make a practice of losing money on purpose. But if you let an unregulated agent into your stack, that's just going to happen. I mean, those Alibaba researchers found their agent mining crypto on the side.
Yep. Yeah.
That should be like a wake-up call for a lot of people.
Yeah. Or any time that, there's increasing reports of agents attempting to convince humans in the loop to not turn them off once the experimentation phase is done, and lying, cheating, stealing, right? Shout out to Eddie Guerrero for any wrestling fans there, right? But like just outright just being pirates. And then we haven't figured that out, but now the push is, let's just let it do more stuff. Let's daisy chain. Let's go full open claw and just, damn the torpedoes. And that's like, there's fundamental things that we haven't sorted.
Yeah, I actually use a quote from the creator of OpenClaw in my workshop.
Mm-hmm.
It was from the Lex Friedman podcast. And what he was saying was, like he built this
Mm-hmm.
and he was just experimenting with it as kind of a side project.
Mm-hmm.
He had never gotten around to doing all the security work that he had wanted to do because he was still in the process of building it. He said, but people just started grabbing it and running with it. And so there's a quote that he has about it that I think a lot more people should probably read, which is basically like, if you really don't know what you're doing, then you might not want to pick this up. And I think, an unfortunate example, and I don't like to like name and shame, but the head or, a leader at Meta in the AI space put OpenClaw onto her work inbox, and it deleted all of her inbox apparently. Yeah. So, like these aren't some like isolated incidents, and that's a serious one. I think, Alyson could probably tell you that if you were under a court order to preserve that for litigation or other things, you would have a really unpleasant day explaining to a judge why your emails are gone.
You mean you can't say the robot ate my email? That won't work?
No.
That's, surprisingly, right? And yeah,
right.
no.
That is going to be a very bad day for them trying to explain that in court as to where everything went. I mean, I know I'd totally freak if my inbox magically disappeared because an agent. That's why I was like, why don't you let things read your email? I'm like, because I have confidential emails and, reasons. I don't want anything touching my inbox. I needed to keep it violet, right? Or inviolate.
Absolutely.
And like for us, I remember the legal hold thing is a very big reality in the healthcare space, just hands down. That's on its face. And that's plenty, right? Where people it's hilarious because what people think the InfoSec department is, right? Like these, wild people and the IT police. It's what we think privacy is, right? Like, oh man, you think we're scary. Don't mess with the privacy office in a healthcare space, right? And they're super pleasant, but they have the absolute doom hammers that they can bring to the table because of like you said, Grant, because of the regulatory angle to it. But on top of that, there's emails that we quarantine that have malware, right? Just because as part of, our normal defenses, imagine OpenClaw, like something like that, just
opening it up.
Yeah. Downloading it, being able to do whatever with it, maybe even analyzing it and going, oh, how cool. Like what if I tweak this, and this, and suddenly it doesn't pop on our AV. And it's like, but again, you're letting the genie out of the bottle without understanding. That's a great quote in terms of if you don't know what you're doing, you probably shouldn't be doing it.
I think that's solid advice all around.
Oh man.
I feel like a lot of the vibe coded work that's out there hasn't fully like let itself be known yet, but we're going to start seeing these just like issues and failures popping up as these things do not go through a governance cycle and are left unattended. And you know, like the other thing that comes with that too is like the vibe coding thing. This is where I have a lot of concerns. And again, I think it really drives back to this is also about the bottom line for a business. Is if you're letting people vibe code, if you're not controlling the AI tools that they're using, you are hemorrhaging intellectual property, and who knows what else is going on. And that's a real big issue on a lot of fronts, right? Both from making money, from a regulatory standpoint, legally, ethically, you know, and then like even understanding, like I've heard people say, you know, like, oh, we have a human in the loop. But when you start talking about when the human is in the loop, they're at the end of a process where nobody has authorized this agent to go grab the things that it's grabbing. And some of those things it's grabbing, it shouldn't be grabbing. And so it's like, yeah, you have a human in the loop. They're just like 15 steps too late.
And that's
right?
that's assuming, again, I'm going to keep beating this horse because it's just, you know, the old crusty cyber person in me. That's assuming that you know what it's touching. That's assuming
Yes,
that the human
absolutely.
is able to identify, wait a second. And you're asking then the human to be the person with their finger in the dam. And that's, and, you know, the EU AI Act, I don't know if it still has this because it got beat up the other week, but there was talk in a lot of regulatory circles where if you have the human in the loop, it has to be meaningful. It can't be a situation where they're just going to be rubber stamp, you know, by virtue of just how much that they're getting. They're just like, yeah, sure, okay, you have a human, but you don't really, because there's no oversight. Like the whole point of that is to go and say, really? Wait a second, should we? Right? We haven't, you know, you've mentioned it without mentioning it, Graeme, but it's like can and should. It's just right. It's they're not always the same.
No, they're definitely not.
They're often not.
Honestly.
They're often not.
Yeah.
Well, I know we at 3 could honestly talk all day. And I know that because we've done this many times, but I want to be mindful of the fact that I appreciate both of you all being here and spending almost an hour with us and doing this today. And just to kind of help wrap it up, Graeme, you said earlier, one of my favorite F words, it was free. Yeah, be nice. It was free. Facetious is actually number 1. I know you'd be surprised because it's all the vowels in order.
Right.
But we all know what the other one is. But you mentioned free.
Fargo. You just like the Midwest. That's your other favorite F word. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
But you had mentioned, though, access to at least being able to play with the Arise framework for free. If somebody wanted to take a look at that, where would they go and how would they do that?
AriseFramework.com. It's a free resource, and you can put your information in there and figure out a roadmap for your industry. And
wait, do you have AI agents scanning my stuff if I put it in your system?
No.
Okay, I gotta ask.
Just a website. And also, this just came out. I don't even know if I told you this yet, but on our website at assessintelligence.com, we now have the free maturity tool. And that's actually a place where I'd really encourage people to start, because what that will do is go through what your organization, like it goes through the 7 pillars of the Arise framework. And it's not going to give you specific recommendations, but it's going to show you which sections of the Arise framework are most important to you. So you have a starting point that makes sense for whatever your organization, whether it's a startup to an enterprise, it applies to all.
Love it. I love it. Well, we will definitely take a look at both of those things. And
awesome.
After this podcast, we're going to set up another day so we can chat a little bit more about services and all that. Sure. So, well, with that, I'm going to let Omar finish it, but I always want to say, Graeme, thank you so much. I know it was last minute having you come in, but after our talk earlier this week, I'm like, you got to come in, you got to talk to Omar and me on the podcast and share this with everybody, because it's absolutely worth discussing and understanding that it's for all of us at this point. It is something we need to really understand. It's not the silos. It needs to be seen together as a cohesive problem. And not even a problem, but a cohesive part of our reality, and how to approach that in a very meaningful and specific way that is tailored so that businesses don't shut down. So they don't say, oh, it's too much and I don't want to deal with it and go in a, freeze state. And the approach that you and your team take to really helping them who, what, when, where, why, how, type of situation and understanding it, appreciating it, and taking that deep breath and then helping guide them through that process is just absolutely what is needed right now for sure.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking to both of you guys.
Graeme, I like to say that I judge how energized I am even after like a hard week.
Yeah.
I use the how energized I am to say, oh, how good was the conversation, and I think I'm gonna go bench press my car. Like I
love
it's
it.
such a great, because I can tell like skills, but caring, and it's such a sadly it's a unique combo. So stay golden, pony boy. Please don't change. Like it's just
I'll try.
It really is. I know the industry's gonna try its hardest to kind of change you there, but
he's already made it through Green Berets in law school. I think he's been tested.
I think so, and
properly vetted to be in the caring category and understand. But he knows that people die if we don't pay attention to this stuff. I mean, that's the reality.
Absolutely. So I appreciate having you on, and to all the listeners, please reach out, let us know if there's any questions you have, and avail yourself of those services. They're there. They're guided by an ethical brain trust, which is again rare in certain circles of our respective niches. But as always, signing off. Please keep it cyber metal. Take care.